I never meant to carry it this long. When the hurt first came, I thought I'd move on. Time would do its work, I told myself. A few weeks, maybe months, and the sting would dull, the anger would fade, the memory would soften. But that's not how it went. The pain stayed. And I carried it, quietly, steadily, like a stone in my pocket that no one could see. There's a strange thing about grudges. They don't scream. They whisper. They hide beneath your smile, between your words, inside your silence. They walk with you into new rooms, new friendships, new mornings, and you don't even notice the weight, until one day you do. And by then, you're so used to it that you almost feel afraid to put it down. I used to think I had good reasons. Real ones. Things people did that they shouldn't have. Words that were said, or never said, that cut deeper than they realized. I had memories I played like old tapes, scenes of betrayal, moments of being dismissed, people who hurt me and walked away without a second glance. And because no one ever came back to say, "I'm sorry," I told myself I had a right to hold on. Maybe I did. But rights don't always lead to peace. For years, I wore my hurt like a quiet badge. I didn't talk about it often, but I thought about it more than I cared to admit. Not in rage, that had burned out long ago, but in something colder. Resentment. Bitterness. The quiet conviction that I had been wronged, and that the world owed me something to make it right. But life doesn't pay those debts. And the longer I held on to those grudges, the more they began to hold on to me. It crept into the way I spoke, sharpness where softness used to be. It showed up in my trust, hesitant, distant, always waiting for the letdown. It lived in my body, in tight shoulders, shallow breaths, sleepless nights. And it followed me into silence, that place where my thoughts ran circles and never found a place to rest. The funny thing is, no one around me would have guessed. I was kind. I was calm. I smiled. I helped others. I played my part. But beneath all that, there was still a part of me clenched tight, carrying things that should have been laid down years ago. Sometimes I'd catch myself mid-thought, still replaying an old wound like it happened yesterday. Still thinking of what I should have said. What they should have said. How unfair it was. How it still hurt. And I'd feel it, that old heaviness, like a shadow on my chest. I never told anyone just how tired I was of it all. Of the weight. Of the coldness. Of the grip it had on my life. But I carried it anyway. Because at some point, pain becomes familiar. And even when it hurts, we're afraid of what life will feel like without it. I thought letting go would mean letting them off the hook. I thought forgiving would make me weak. I thought it meant saying, what you did was okay. But none of that was true. I hadn't yet learned that forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. It's the key you give yourself to open the door you've been locked behind. But back then, I didn't have that key. Only the weight. The memory. And the quiet ache of a heart that couldn't quite heal because it wouldn't let go. I carried that ache into good seasons too. Into joy. Into friendship. Into growth. And still, it followed. It dulled moments that should have felt brighter. It made laughter feel thinner. It made love harder. And somewhere deep down, I began to ask the quiet question. What if this never leaves? That question scared me. Because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life heavy. I didn't want to grow old with clenched fists and an armored heart. I wanted peace. Not just the kind you speak of, but the kind that lives in your bones. I didn't know how to get there yet. But I was starting to suspect one thing. I couldn't carry this forever. And maybe I didn't have to. In the next part, I'll share one of the wounds I held onto the longest, the one that taught me the cost of silence, and the ache of never hearing, "I'm sorry." But for now, if you're holding something heavy, something someone did, or didn't do, I want you to know this. You don't have to forgive today. You don't have to understand it all. You just have to let yourself feel how heavy it's become. And wonder, gently, what life might feel like without it. That wondering is where my freedom began. Some of the deepest wounds I carry don't come with scars you can see. They weren't loud. There were no slammed doors. No shouting. No dramatic exits. Just moments. Moments when someone I trusted hurt me, and walked away like nothing had happened. And the hardest part? They never said sorry. Not once. It's a strange kind of ache, isn't it? The kind that doesn't come from what was done, but from what was never acknowledged. Like being hit and then told it didn't happen. Like bleeding from a paper cut that no one believes is real because it's small, but it stings every time you move. I carried that kind of pain longer than I care to admit. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. I said, "I'll get over it," and smiled through it like I always did. But deep down, I waited, quietly, stubbornly, for an apology that never came. I imagined how it might go. They'd call me. Or show up. Or send a letter. They'd look at me with soft eyes and say, "I know I hurt you. I'm sorry." And somehow, in that moment, all the weight would fall away. But that moment never came. And the waiting turned into resentment. The hurt turned into a quiet wall. Not one anyone else could see. But I felt it, in the way I stopped opening up, stopped trusting, stopped expecting anything from anyone. Because when someone hurts you and never says sorry, the world feels a little less safe. I remember one person in particular, someone I loved deeply. They said something once, a single sentence, that cut so deeply I couldn't breathe for a moment. It wasn't a fight. There was no raised voice. Just a quiet jab, like a needle in the heart. And I stood there, blinking, waiting for them to realize what they'd done. They never did. They just kept talking. Like nothing happened. Like I didn't flinch. Like the silence between us wasn't suddenly filled with something sharp. I never brought it up. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself they didn't mean it. I told myself to move on. But I didn't. Not really. Because every time I saw them after that, I remembered. Not just what they said, but that they never took it back. And here's the truth I didn't want to face. I needed them to acknowledge it more than I realized. I needed someone to name the pain, so I didn't have to carry it alone. But when they didn't, I buried it. And it became something else. A quiet belief that my feelings didn't matter. That what hurt me wasn't worth saying out loud. That maybe, just maybe, I was too sensitive. I spent years living with that belief. And because I never got the apology, I held on to the hurt. I thought, if I let this go, they'll never know how much they hurt me. But what I didn't understand yet was this. Holding on to the pain didn't teach them anything. It only kept hurting me. They moved on. They laughed. They lived. And I stayed stuck in that one sentence. That one moment. That one wound. Forgiveness, in that case, felt impossible. Why should I forgive someone who never even admitted what they did? But over time, I started to see the quiet truth. Forgiveness isn't about them understanding. It's about me choosing not to let what they did define me anymore. It's about releasing myself from the need to be validated by someone who never saw the depth of the damage. And that takes time. It doesn't happen in a day. It starts with letting yourself admit, yes, that hurt. And no, I never got the apology I deserved. But you know what else I realized? I'm allowed to heal anyway. Even without the apology. Even without the closure. Even without them ever knowing how deep the wound went. And that is power. In the next part, I'll share how that quiet hurt began to shape my habits, how bitterness slowly became a way of living I didn't even realize I had chosen. But for tonight, if you're holding pain that no one ever said sorry for, I want to say this. I see you. I believe you. And you don't have to wait for someone else to release you from it. You can begin to heal right now, not for them, but for you. At first, it was just a reaction. A moment of pain. A quiet resentment. A silent "how could they?" that echoed for days. But then, without realizing it, it became more than a reaction. It became a rhythm. A reflex. A habit. Bitterness doesn't start loud. It starts in small ways. Like tightening your smile when someone new gets too close. Like hearing good news from someone who hurt you and feeling nothing but coldness. Like silently hoping they'll fail, not out of cruelty, but because it somehow feels like justice. That was me. I didn't think of myself as bitter. I was still kind. Still helpful. Still polite. But inside, I was guarded. Cautious. Wary. I carried a quiet edge with me into every room. I called it wisdom. But really, it was fear. Fear of being hurt again. Fear of opening the door and finding the same betrayal waiting behind it. So I built walls, not made of anger, but of silence. Not of shouting, but of withdrawal. If someone disappointed me, I didn't tell them. I just stepped back. If someone apologized, I nodded, but didn't really let it in. If someone loved me, I smiled, but deep down, I waited for the part where they'd leave. Because that's what bitterness teaches you. To expect the worst. To prepare for the fall. To mistrust peace, because you've learned that it doesn't last. And over time, I stopped realizing I was doing it. It just became how I lived. I told myself I was just independent. That I didn't need anyone. That I was strong because I didn't expect much from people anymore. But strength without softness isn't wholeness, it's armor. And armor gets heavy after a while. I missed out on moments. Moments when someone reached for me and I stepped back. Moments when someone tried to care and I looked the other way. Moments when life offered me tenderness, and I met it with suspicion. Because somewhere deep inside, I believed I had to protect myself, always. Bitterness pretends to be a shield. But it's really a cage. It keeps you safe, yes. But it also keeps you alone. There was one evening, I remember it well, when a friend I hadn't seen in years called me out of the blue. They wanted to reconnect. Apologize, even. I kept the conversation short. Friendly. But distant. And after we hung up, I sat in silence and thought. Why didn't I let them in? The truth? Because the bitterness had settled in so deeply, I no longer trusted bridges. Only fences. It took me years to realize that holding on to bitterness wasn't protecting me. It was poisoning me, slowly, quietly. It was making joy feel risky. Connection feel dangerous. Trust feel foolish. And the saddest part? I had no idea how much I had missed until I started softening again. But that softening didn't begin with action. It began with awareness. With noticing how bitterness had woven itself into my everyday life. With asking hard questions. Why do I flinch at kindness? Why do I assume the worst? Why does forgiveness feel like surrender? And more than anything, what am I so afraid of losing if I let go of this pain? In the next part, I'll tell you about the moment I finally knew, deep in my bones, that I couldn't keep living like this. That the bitterness wasn't keeping me safe. It was keeping me small. But for now, if any of this feels familiar, if you've caught yourself bracing when someone gets close, or shrinking from joy because it feels unfamiliar, please know, you are not broken. You're just tired. Tired of holding up a wall that was built out of old hurt. And it's okay to begin, gently, taking it down. One brick. One breath. One quiet choice at a time. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder in the sky. No breakdown in the middle of the night. No one came to me with words of wisdom or a perfect reason to let go. It was just an ordinary afternoon. I was sitting alone, folding laundry. The sun was coming in through the window, soft and golden, like it always did. And a thought passed through my mind, not loud, not urgent, just there. I'm tired of this. Not just the chores. Not just the day. But the weight. The anger. The way I had kept old pain alive like it was part of my identity. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was how peaceful the room felt, and how much that peace didn't match what I was carrying inside. But in that moment, I saw myself clearly. Still replaying conversations that had ended years ago. Still holding on to words never spoken. Still waiting for someone, anyone, to make it right. And I thought, what if they never do? What if no one apologizes? What if no one comes back? What if no one ever admits they were wrong? And more importantly, do I want to carry this with me for the rest of my life? That was the question that broke something open. Because the truth was, no. I didn't want to bring that pain into my tomorrow. I didn't want to hand it down to my peace, to my friendships, to the soft joy I still hoped to feel. I wanted to be free. More than I wanted to be right. More than I wanted revenge. More than I wanted them to understand. I just wanted to be free. And in that moment, for the first time, I realized that forgiveness wasn't something I had to feel, it was something I could choose. Even if my heart wasn't ready. Even if I still felt the sting. Even if I didn't know how. I could choose the direction. I could say, with a whisper, not a roar, I don't want to carry this anymore. That was all. Not a full release. Not instant peace. Just a turning. A soft pivot towards something lighter. I wish I could say it all changed that day. That the weight fell off. That I smiled and never looked back. But no, healing isn't tidy like that. Still, that moment mattered. Because it was honest. And for the first time, I wasn't focused on them, what they did, what they didn't do. I was focused on me. My breath. My hands, folding laundry. My future, waiting quietly beyond the fog of old pain. And I asked myself one last thing. If no one else ever makes this right, can I still choose to be free? That question changed everything. Because it put the power back in my hands, not in theirs. Not in the past. Not in the apology I never got. Just me. And the quiet, steady decision to walk toward peace. In the next part, I'll share what that first step looked like, how I began the slow, uncomfortable, freeing process of loosening my grip on the need for revenge. But for now, I want to say this to anyone sitting in that same quiet, folding the same old anger. You are not weak for wanting peace. You are not naive for hoping to be free. You are simply someone who's tired of being hurt, even when the person hurting you is long gone. And if that's where you are now, you're already beginning. Just like I did. For a long time, I told myself I didn't want revenge. I said things like, I've moved on, or I don't care anymore. But if I'm honest, I did care. I cared a lot. I wanted them to know they hurt me. I wanted them to feel what I felt, the confusion, the weight, the sleepless nights. I didn't want to ruin their life, but I wanted them to carry at least a piece of what I had carried. Not because I was cruel, but because I was human. And because, somewhere deep down, I believed that if they suffered even a little, maybe I'd feel better. I never said it out loud. It wasn't a conscious plan. Just a quiet voice, whispering, if they're doing fine, how can I ever be? That voice lived in me longer than I wanted to admit. It smiled when I heard they were struggling. It felt oddly satisfied when life didn't go their way. But afterward, I always felt emptier than before. There's a cold truth about bitterness. Even when you get what you think you want, their downfall, their pain, their regret, it doesn't heal you. It doesn't bring back what was lost. It doesn't soothe the part of you that needed an apology. It doesn't make the past unhappen. It just keeps you tethered, to them, to it, to all of it. And one day, I realized something strange. I wasn't waiting for healing. I was waiting for revenge. I was holding back my own peace until I saw them hurt. And that broke my heart. Because it meant I had given them even more power. They weren't in my life anymore, and yet, they still controlled whether I felt free or not. That realization was sobering. I had been saying, I'll be okay when they understand. But the truth was, I could be okay when I stopped needing them to. So I began the slow process of unlearning that need. It didn't happen overnight. There were still moments when the old voice crept in. When I'd think, it's not fair, they should suffer too. But every time, I'd pause. Breathe. And ask myself, is this thought giving me peace? Or just more pain? And little by little, I started to understand. I didn't need them to lose for me to win. I didn't need them to hurt for me to heal. I didn't need justice in the way I once thought I did. Because my healing was never going to come from their suffering. It was going to come from my release. I had to stop keeping score. I had to stop clinging to the fantasy that one day, they'd show up with guilt in their eyes, ready to make it all right. That fantasy wasn't hope. It was a chain. And I was finally ready to break it. Now, when I think of them, and yes, they still cross my mind from time to time, I don't wish them harm. I don't wish them joy either, if I'm being honest. But I don't wish them pain. I just let them be. And in that letting go, I make space for myself to live again. In the next part, I'll share what those first steps toward forgiveness looked like, not as a grand declaration, but as small, clumsy moments of trying to soften. But for now, if part of you still wants them to hurt, if you catch yourself hoping karma remembers, please hear this. That's okay. It doesn't make you bad. It makes you honest. But you don't have to stay there. You can want more for your heart than the cycle of hurt. You can choose peace, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Forgiveness didn't come to me as a lightning bolt. It wasn't a big moment, a teary breakthrough, or a sudden letting go. It came slowly, quietly, almost clumsily. It started with a whisper. A gentle question I hadn't allowed myself to ask before. What if I don't want to stay angry anymore? Not, what if they deserve forgiveness? Not, what if they've changed? Just, what if this anger is too heavy for me now? That was the door. And opening it took more courage than I expected. Because for so long, my anger had been my shield. My reason. My story. Letting it go felt like giving something up, like losing the only proof that yes, I had been hurt. Yes, it mattered. So I started small. I wrote their name on a piece of paper. Not to curse it. Not to burn it. Just to look at it. To remind myself, this was a person. A flawed, human person. Not a villain. Not a shadow. Not a monster. Just someone. And I whispered, I don't know how to forgive you yet. But I want to. That's how it began. Not with forgiveness. But with the desire to someday be free enough to forgive. That small honesty softened something in me. The next time their name came up, I didn't flinch. The next time I remembered what they did, I breathed a little deeper. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had stopped fighting it. I started sitting with the hurt instead of pushing it away. Noticing how it still lived in my body, in my chest, my stomach, my jaw. And each time, I asked gently, can I let a little of this go today? Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes it was no. But even the asking was movement. I stopped telling myself I had to feel forgiveness all at once. Instead, I gave myself permission to forgive in pieces, like smoothing sharp edges over time. One day, I saw their photo online. Old me would have rolled my eyes or scoffed or made a quiet remark to no one. But that day, I just scrolled past. No reaction. No rush of heat. Just stillness. That's when I knew forgiveness was already happening. Not because I said the words. Not because I forgot. But because I no longer needed to keep proving how hurt I'd been. I still remembered. I still felt it sometimes. But I had stopped feeding it. And that changed everything. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't erase. It doesn't excuse. It doesn't demand you pretend. It just releases. Releases you from the need to relive it. Releases you from waiting for justice. Releases you from the version of yourself who was frozen in that pain. In the next part, I'll talk about something just as important, maybe even harder. How I learned that forgiving someone didn't mean I had to forget what they did. That boundaries and compassion can live in the same breath. But for now, if you're at the beginning, if you don't feel ready to forgive but you're tired of carrying the ache, start with this. I want to. Say it softly. Say it often. And trust that forgiveness, like anything living, grows slowly. Even in you. One of the things that held me back from forgiving, for a long time, was this fear. If I forgive them, does that mean it didn't matter? Does it mean I pretend it never happened? That it didn't hurt? That I just move on like nothing was broken? Because I couldn't do that. And I didn't want to. Some wounds leave a mark. And asking someone to forget is like asking a tree not to remember the lightning that split its branches. We remember. Because we're human. Because our memory is not a weakness, it's a record. A witness. A part of us. So no, forgiving didn't make me forget. I still remember the words they said. I still remember how I felt in the moment the hurt landed. I still remember the silence after, the aching space where an apology never came. But here's the shift. I don't hold those memories with fire anymore. They don't sting the way they used to. They don't define me. They don't dictate who I am, or how I love, or what I believe I deserve. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It simply stopped letting the past control my present. For a while, I thought if I forgave, I had to let them back in. That I had to rebuild the relationship. that I had to soften all the boundaries and open all the doors again. But I've since learned. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. Forgiveness is something I do within myself. Reconciliation is something that takes two people and trust. And sometimes, that trust can't be rebuilt. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is love someone from a distance. There are people I've forgiven who will never be in my life again. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Out of care for my own peace. Forgiveness allowed me to unclench my heart. But it didn't ask me to forget what I'd learned. And what I learned is this. I can forgive and still say that was not okay. I can forgive and still choose to walk away. I can forgive and still remember so that I protect the person I've become. Because healing doesn't mean erasing. It means remembering differently. Now, when I think of those who hurt me, I don't flinch. I don't rehearse the pain. I simply nod, inwardly, and think, I've grown since then. That's what forgiveness gave me. Not forgetfulness, but freedom. In the next part, I'll share a turning point that surprised me more than anything. The day I realized I wasn't just carrying hurt from others. I was carrying hurt I had caused myself. And that I, too, needed forgiving. But for tonight, if you're struggling with the idea that forgiveness means excusing what happened, I want to offer you this truth. You can forgive and still protect your heart. You can forgive and still keep your distance. You can forgive and still carry the memory with dignity. Forgiveness doesn't say, it didn't matter. It says, it mattered, but it no longer controls me. And that is enough. I had spent so much time thinking about the people who hurt me. What they said. What they didn't say. How they should have done better. How I deserved more. But one quiet morning, as I sat with my coffee and the slow hum of birds outside, a thought came that stopped me. What about the hurt I caused myself? I hadn't prepared for that question. It came not with shame, but with softness. Like an old friend, finally asking, when will you stop punishing yourself? And suddenly, I saw it. All the times I stayed too long in places I knew were hurting me. All the times I silenced my needs, my voice, just to keep the peace. All the times I saw red flags and painted them white. All the times I knew better, but didn't do better. It's easy to blame others. And sometimes, the blame is deserved. But underneath that, there was me. A younger version of me. Doing their best. Trying to be loved. Trying not to lose everything. Trying to be strong when I didn't even know what strength really was. And instead of holding that version with compassion, I had been punishing them. Quietly. Daily. Silently. I carried shame like a second skin. You should have known better. You let them treat you that way. You made your bed, now lie in it. Words I would never say to a friend, but somehow, I said them to myself without flinching. That morning, I closed my eyes and tried something different. I imagined that younger me, standing in front of me, eyes tired, shoulders heavy. And I said, out loud, quietly but clearly, you didn't deserve what happened. You made mistakes, yes, but you were trying. You don't have to keep paying for it. You are forgiven. By me. And I cried. Not the kind of tears that come from sadness, but the kind that come from release. Because I didn't realize how much of my heaviness came not from others, but from how hard I had been on myself. Forgiveness, I learned, is not just about letting others off the hook. It's about setting yourself free from your own grip, too. It's about no longer defining yourself by the worst things you allowed, or the moments when you were lost. It's about saying, I didn't know then what I know now. And I forgive myself for that. Since that day, I've made it a quiet practice. When I catch myself thinking, you failed, I gently correct it. You tried. Let's try again. When I feel the urge to judge my past, I offer gratitude instead. You brought me here. That's enough. In the next part, I'll talk about what happened after that forgiveness, how life, bit by bit, began to return to me. How peace started to feel real again. But for now, if you're carrying shame that doesn't have a name, if you've forgiven others but still whisper harshness to yourself in the dark, please listen. You don't have to earn your own forgiveness. You just have to stop believing you're unworthy of it. Look at yourself, truly. See the younger you, the tired you, the trying you, and say softly, I forgive you. Say it again, if you need to. Say it every day, if you must. Because forgiveness doesn't always start with a grand gesture. Sometimes, it starts with a whisper from the soul. I am no longer my own enemy. No one tells you this part. They tell you forgiveness is noble. That it's about doing the right thing. That it's about becoming the bigger person. But what they don't always say is that forgiveness gives you something back. And for me, it gave me joy. Not the kind that bursts with laughter or dances through the streets, but the kind that quietly returns, like birdsong after a long winter. I didn't even notice it at first. I just started sleeping better. My chest didn't feel as tight. The morning felt softer. My tea tasted warmer. I wasn't rehearsing old conversations in my head while brushing my teeth. That constant loop, what they said, what I should have said, how unfair it was. It began to fade. And in the space it left behind, something beautiful returned. My breath. My presence. My peace. I started noticing things again. The way light spilled through the kitchen window. The sound of my feet on the floor. The smell of toast in the morning. Nothing grand. Just moments I had forgotten how to feel, because I'd been living in the past for so long. Forgiveness brought me back to now. It gave me the ability to be here, in my life, instead of trapped in a moment that ended years ago. I found myself smiling at strangers again. Not because I had to, but because I wasn't carrying so much heaviness anymore. I laughed at things that weren't even that funny. Because laughter finally had room to live inside me again. It's strange, how bitterness crowds everything. You don't notice how much space it takes up until you finally set it down. And when you do, you realize. Joy doesn't have to be earned. It just needs room. One of the most unexpected things I got back was my softness. For years, I wore strength like armor, sharp, polished, heavy. But after forgiveness, I found a gentler kind of strength. The kind that allows you to cry without shame. The kind that says, yes, I was hurt, and I still choose to love. I also got time back. All those hours spent stewing, analyzing, reliving. I now spend walking, reading, resting, connecting. Not every day is perfect. There are still aches, still shadows. But now, they pass. They visit, they no longer live here. Forgiveness didn't erase what happened. But it gave me back what I thought I'd lost forever. My ability to feel light. To feel whole. To feel like myself again. And perhaps most sacred of all, it gave me silence that doesn't scream. Now, when I sit alone, the quiet isn't full of echoes from old wounds. It's just quiet. Safe. peaceful. In the next part, the final one, I'll share what I now believe about forgiveness, not as a duty or a moral ideal, but as a soft, private kind of freedom. The kind no one has to see or validate, but that changes everything. But for now, if you're still holding on, still unsure what letting go might feel like, let me tell you. It feels like air in your lungs again. It feels like your shoulders finally dropping. It feels like music sounds sweeter. Like sleep comes sooner. Like kindness grows easier. It feels like coming home to yourself. Forgiveness didn't make me feel powerful. It didn't come with fireworks. It didn't make the people who hurt me change. They didn't come back. They didn't say sorry. They didn't even know. And yet, something inside me shifted. Not loudly. Not all at once. But surely, like a long exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding. That, to me, is the true shape of forgiveness. Not noise. Not drama. Not closure tied in a perfect bow. Just stillness. A quiet kind of freedom. The kind that lets you rest again. That lets you laugh without guilt. That lets you feel joy without waiting for it to be taken away. Forgiveness didn't erase my story, it just stopped letting one chapter define the whole book. I used to think forgiveness was for good people. Strong people. I didn't feel like either. I just felt tired. Tired of carrying what wasn't mine anymore. Tired of reliving what I couldn't change. And in that tiredness, I found permission. To lay it down. To say, I don't need this pain to prove anything anymore. Because here's the quiet truth no one can give you, you have to live it to know it. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to someone else. It's a gift you give to yourself. And no one has to see it. No one has to validate it. No one even has to deserve it. You can simply choose it, quietly, inwardly, like a candle you light in your own chest. Not to forget. Not to excuse. But to be free. And that freedom doesn't shout. It doesn't post. It doesn't demand anything from anyone. It just lets you be here again. Whole. Breathing. Unburdened. In the months after I finally forgave, people told me I seemed softer. Not weaker, just lighter. Like someone who no longer needed armor to walk through the world. And it was true. Because forgiveness didn't make me forget. It helped me remember who I was before the hurt. Someone open. Someone kind. Someone who believed in peace. And now, I carry that version of me forward, not perfectly, not always, but honestly. Because I know how heavy the other way feels. And I don't want to go back there. So if you're still holding on, if you're not ready to forgive yet, if the pain is still too fresh, too sharp, too loud, I understand. You don't have to rush. You don't have to force it. You don't even have to forgive today. But just know this. There is a freedom waiting on the other side of all that weight. And when you are ready, it will welcome you without judgment. No trumpet. No parade. Just open hands. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't say, you were never hurt. It says, you were, and now, you're free. And that, dear listener, is enough.